But the plan B allows to me from the very beginning to work with Sarda initially as a teaching assistant, but immediately, because the director of the operation department started to think that environmental issues will be important, I had a course in 1990 about environmental issues in management. So in Spain we have something that is good for us, that is something called compatibility, and because of that we can have two contracts. So I have the contract of be a scientist, and this is my major, to be a scientist, and I have the contract to be teacher in Sarda as an associate professor. So this is the combination. And of course, with the zoology, I couldn't go too much further in business, so I decided to jump into what is my professional life right now, which is I'm being socioecologist. I'm a socioecologist, mostly working on the marine environment. So tomorrow I'm going to teach in another conference that we have in Corvinus, and in this particular conference I will append something else that I'm going to pass to you today, which is this business in nature idea to apply this in the blue economy. So this is what I'm doing these days through foundations and through Horizon projects, and trying to get as much in practice as I can. Okay, so just for introduction, and I'm a fanatic of FC Barcelona, Messi, Lamine Yamal, and that's for sure. So if you know some guy from Real Madrid that is going to be down there when he died, come to me, because then I can evangelize this guy to be with you up there. Okay, so but today I'm going to talk to you about a concept that we deliver. We started to think the concept in this particular work group that Sandor was telling you. For 30 years we have been working in a group called Business and the Environment, teaching in this Global Alliance of Management Education. And in the last years, with Stefano Pouch, which is another of this professor, actually is the director of the MBA in Bocconi, we started to think that, probably you know, what we are just applying these days in business, the triple bottom line, maybe is not enough in order to deal with all the problems we have in the world. And we are trying to pass a different corporate sustainability framework, a little bit different, concentrating mostly on these environmental problems, because I come from the environmental issues, and we call it this business in nature. I will explain to you why a little bit later. So we wrote a book that now we are doing the revision, the second revision of the book, and with this particular framework. And what I'm going to tell you more or less in today is something that we wrote in the first two chapters of the book, which is why we need to do this transformation in business, and why we need to move into something else a little bit farther of the triple bottom line. And I will stop in here and try to do that in 45 minutes if I can, because Sandor is always pressuring me. I talk too much, that is true, so I can be with you 3 hours, and then he will be getting nervous. Okay, when I'm teaching, I teach basically in all programs of the school, from BBAs, from bachelor into the high executive, and always start with that particular slide, which is a kind of timeline of the last 100 years, and in which we humans relate with the environment, the way in which we have been related with the environment. I was born in 1957, so starting for a moment of the year, a moment of the history that we were worried about other issues and nothing about the environment. In the 60s, we jumped into what we call local problems. We have had, sorry, I need to talk about that because of recording. We jump into these local problems, Hollywood movies, you have seen plenty of them, Raquel Carson, and only few people, like the ones from the MIT, started to think that the future was not promising if we were moving again in this particular business, the business class. So they were just saying that, but nobody was paying attention on this guy. In the 80s, we jumped into sustainability, and still many people start anchored in that particular definition of sustainability, and the way in which sustainability was defined there, which basically was we are pressuring the environment, we are impacting the environment, and we need to minimize the impact. And we were, and sometimes we have been anchored on that. The important part was the impact. But in 2005, United Nations defined this, launched this new report, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Report, and it came with an idea about ecosystem service also, but an idea that was very important. It's not just about that we pressure the environment, it's that we are the environment, and we depend completely about the environment. So this footprint and dependence are two things, two sides of the same coin, and we need to incorporate that in whatever we do. So the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment says something about ecosystems. Right now, ecosystem has been converted for many of us into what we define social ecological systems, but anyway, ecosystems. And something that you have read too many times, that we just make well-being of people increase, but we didn't pay attention in what was the degradation of the environment in which this was based. This slide is basically the four conclusions, the four big conclusions of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Report. The last conclusion, that we will see a little bit late, is the one that is putting attention to practices, so it's putting attention to it's putting attention to business in the way we need to transform ourselves. Business transformation is something that we need, and we need for the future desperately, I would say. Okay, so this is what I'm going to tell you right now. The first part is, remember, is my course that I do normally in Masters and I do also in the BBA is called Global Environmental Challenges and the Business Response. And this is an abstract of this course, basically. So global environmental challenges represented by this. Many of you have seen the movie because this movie is this Chinese movie that won the Oscar 3 or 4 years ago. And the movie is also representing the global environmental challenges we have today. Everything is happening, everything is global, and everything is happening at the same time. So we are just pressured by a lot of problems, and those problems are occurring at the same all over. And then we need to respond. So the first part starts with this magic number that if you are doing something about environmental economics or about sustainability, you probably will know. With Stefano, at the beginning of the book, we decided to try to pass the message of something that was 5 years ago was kind of word, the Anthropocene. Right now, the Geological Society, World Geological Society, did not approve this concept, but still the concept is there. If 1 million years from now, some aliens comes to the Earth and they have these historical geological eras of the Earth, they will find a layer in the soils that was our civilization. We have plenty of things that we are just living there for the years and years of the history of the Earth. And because of that, they call it that we are living in the Anthropocene. And then we add the issue about that this Anthropocene is changing the way the Earth system processes are having. And we will talk later about that. With Stefano, we decided to pass the message of the Anthropocene in six clear messages. And the first one is the one that comes with that, and it basically is the population that we have on the Earth and the way in which this population is increasing, because we need to pay attention on that, because not too many years ago we thought that we will be in 2050 9 billion people, but if people does not, and this is what we need to avoid, to kill themselves as crazy, probably will be more than 10 billion people in 2050, and these numbers that are taken from this slide, probably you will get the slides, so don't worry about much. But if this particular web, you can follow up what is happening in demography in all the countries of the world. And if you see the numbers, because I'm a scientist, we work with data, and at the beginning of the courses I have several things that I want to follow. One of this is population, and if you measure the data, you will see that we came from 7 billion people to 8 billion people on the Earth in a little bit more than 10 years. So the way in which we are increasing, This is the rate of increase, 1.4, in the last 20 years. So that means that we are still increasing. It's big enough to know that every time we are having more people in the world, and every time this has other consequences, and he produced other warnings that are going to be following that. So we have this thing about the increase, but we have another increased number, which is the growth of the economy. We are increasing a lot in economic power, and these two increases will make something that is fundamentally not a linear growth, but an exponential growth. I use these slides also for themes, and the green line is when we met with Sándor in 1997. We started to teach here in Hungary the first international course about our group, and you can see the data just from 1997, the 30 years in which we know the way in which we have growth in all these patterns, and all the other things that comes after that. If you put together these two things, these two first messages from the Anthropocene, before to get that, this brings to us to another, I don't know if you know this equation, but this is, for us, it's a magic equation. It's called the fundamental equation, the IPAT equation, but I want to play with that because we want to pass a very strong message with this equation. This equation was brought by Paul Ehrlich, which is an environmentalist from the 60s in the States. So almost ready to die right now, unfortunately. And John Holdren was the chief of the White House for science in the Obama administration. In the 70s, they put together this equation that basically it was say something very, very, very simple. The growth of a population and the growth of the economy, if you want to equalize the environmental impact, should be contrasted by something else. And this something else was thought in that time technology. Now we know that there is something else that technology, what it should be just to be present to equalize the impact. But I want that you we have a lot of approximations with this equation to microeconomy, to use it in particular companies, and you can do it. And it is a very good way to understand in which way companies can reduce the different things with these particular three factors. But the issue I want to pass to you will come later about if these three factors at the environmental impact are still valid today, which you will see that they are not. Okay, so if you put together the population of the affluence, they call it affluence, like the growth, but they call it affluence in American. And if you put together, you have the GDP per capita, and the GDP per capita of the world is just represented in this particular picture. And if you put another graph, I don't know if you see this graph, but there is another graph that comes right now in the picture, and you start to think what it could be similar, mirroring completely the GDP per capita in the world. Well, this is just the way in which we are having emissions in our energy consumption in the world. So the energy, the way in which we are sending tons of CO2 emissions into the air basically mimics what we have in the GDP per capita. So our economy has been based on the use of fossil fuels. This is basically what it is said here. And our economy has been based on the impact we have produced on the world. And the future inevitably goes if in the need that we decouple this growth from the impact. So, but the tendency still is this one, and this is something that we need to quit as soon as possible. This growth, these two growths brings two consequences. I'm not going to elaborate more on that issue, just let's say that these two consequences we think is that because there is a growth factor more than one and another growth factor more than one, the issues that arise from here are exponential. And they are called the great acceleration of almost everything. Everything is getting accelerated because we are going into exponential curves, not in the linear curves. And something that we discovered with the COVID, we have discovered it much before, but with the COVID we were just clearly discovered that everything is connected. So those are two consequences of the growth of population and the growth of the economy. And the latest two messages that I want to pass comes with warnings. And the first warning we had, and it's a warning that put in march a big program of United Nations, which are the Sustainable Development Goals. In the first slide, when we talk about the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, they were called the Millennium Ecosystem Goals, now the Sustainable Development Goals. But in this particular one, United Nations warns people that we are losing resilience, the capacity of adaptation to the changes that we have from the environment. And if we are losing resilience, we need to consider the loss of resilience of many of other organisms that live with us in the world. So resilience is one of the words that brings the first warning. And the second warning, and is the last message, and this is just to my students, in order that they can follow up particular web pages that contains real information, not misinformation, real information. I put these orange webs that they need to consider to follow up. Those are the ones that are related with the Sustainable Development Goals. And the sixth message is the warning of science. And the warning of science has been brought for a guy that, if there is sometime a Nobel Prize of an economy, probably he will get one. It's Johann Rockström, as the father of the idea of the planetary boundaries, the limits that we have in the planet for certain problems we have. And also you can get more information on that in here. So these planetary boundaries are the ones that I'm going to continue with my narrative about that. Those are 9 big environmental problems we have in the world. You can name it in here. From these 9, 2 of them are called the core environmental problems, which is climate change and biodiversity loss, and climate change are the 2 major problems that we think that we have. But we have others. From these 9 problems, only the ocean layer has had a solution because we have a global agreement, but all the others are going drastically worse, and we have a much more pollution than we used to have 10 years ago, even if we are putting a lot of solutions in place, but still we are polluting the world, and we are degrading the world for water, for land, for many issues. So the planetary boundaries, in such way, you may think that planetary boundaries is a concept that, of course, comes from global ecology, but it is a concept that is landing in business. I haven't said that there are people here that are much more on management than in economy, and this is landing in business. So you can get especially business that are dealing with consumers directly, that are having these planetary boundaries to do or to develop strategies. As Kering, for example, L'Oreal, for example, is one of these examples. So these planetary boundaries are landing there, and are landing also in this example that probably if you don't follow that, you should follow that. In the Davos conference in January, they produced something that is called the Global Risk Report. And the Global Risk Report has around 20 editions right now, and you can follow up what this Global Risk Report is saying year to year. And in this Global Risk Report, what it is stated there is, just by interviews, questionnaires to big guys, what are the perception of what are the most important risks that the humanity is going to have in the next decade. That was the initial of this Global Risk Report. And in the case of the last one, that the name is the world in 2026 on a precipice, but the way in which they have been just ranking these problems, when they raise this idea of the next decade, most of the problems that are on the top for the last 10 years are always environmental problems related with these planetary boundaries. But 3 years ago, because the question that normally it comes with in class is, okay, if we know that these are the problems, why we don't act much more on that problems. And then 3 years ago, these guys started to do something else that they didn't before, which is, okay, we ask also the perception of what are the problems that you think are the problems today. For not just for the decade that came in the 30s, no, for the 2027, what will be the main problems. And when you see that, when you see the landscape, you understand that we humans are just worry because of the things that we have on the table, not about the things that are going to happen in 10 years. That's the things that we run. And then those are the ones that are having as the world most important risks today, which are the geoeconomic confrontations. You know this very well. The issue about misinformation, this is ranking. This is something that's a problem, this catastrophic problem for democracy, for example, the polarization of societies, and the extreme weather events that was ranked the first in the decade comes to fourth. You can do the picture wherever, you probably will have the slide, but it's very easy to download this report. You put Global Risk Report in the Google, and you can download the entire report. And I recommend to you strongly to read this particular document because it contains a lot of information about how the world is going. Okay, but coming back to ecology, well, no, it's not ecology, it's just environmental science. The world is basically divided into 4 components. In class I say, okay, do you remember this is one, what are the others? I'm not going to do the question to you because you know that, but those are the 4 components of the world. And these 4 components of the world are just working together in what we call ecological processes. So these major processes that put together the 4 components of the Earth. And I believe that something like that needs to be taught at the first grade in a business school. Because the problems we have today is that some of these Earth system processes, some of these ecological processes has been broken. They were very stable, have been very stable for thousands of years, and now in 50 years we broke many of them. And I will put the example with the energy balance because this is the issue that is making us have the problems that we are having with the climate change. And of course, this is process can make these cycles of elements move in our Earth system. So this is the main conclusions about what we have in global ecology. Something that was very, very stable for years and years and years. We have been able, and still we are doing things as always, and we are just changing the way this stability has been done in the past. Okay, let's go into what I say to you about why it's wrong with the EPAT equation. I'm a sociologist, and this is I learned that 40 years ago. This is not new. In the way you can define what a social ecological system is. A social ecological system means that humans and nature are completely integrally linked. We cannot be separated from nature. We are nature. We are carbon. We are nature. But in order to study that, we normally put this separated, put this in 2 different worlds. And you can say the human dimension and the natural dimension excluding humans. And when you rank this in this particular diagram, the human dimension is you and what you do. This is what the economists are saying. The human capital and the human derived capital. And nature works exactly the same. It's not just one species, it's multitude of species and all the other things that are not living organisms that are with them, the structure of nature, and also what this structure is doing, which are the functions of nature. When you link that two things, intrinsically, they are linked with 2 arrows, one to the right, the way in which we alter nature, and one to the right, the way in which nature gives something to us. We have several possibilities to analyze that, counting frameworks. I'm not going to be just working on this particular issue, but our activities are impacted in nature and causing some effects in nature. Those effects in nature has consequences for the human dimension again, and we respond to that. And we'll put an example right now about this. It's the way in which you can put numbers and for whatever problem you want to measure and whatever boundaries you think that you define your social ecological system, and for the analysis of them, then you can just put the numbers on that. So here is business, just for the application and business. Normally in business schools, for years and years, they have been teaching one particular course that is business in society, which basically sometimes analyze the impact of these societies on the other side, on the part of nature, but many times you quit here the way in which you relate business with some external factors, business in society, but societies are working well only if nature is working well. So the idea of business in nature is that not that you need to do business with nature. No, business is part of nature. And the way in which you are just doing things here contributes to the changes in nature you are seeing. And in this particular diagram, the two things that we saw in the first slide are coming. The impact, your footprint, the impact, this thing that was occupying us in the 80s, and the dependence, the way in which we depend on the environment. We benefit from the environment through a concept that we are not going to touch today, which is the concept of ecosystem services. But we depend on the environment because of that. Just to put you two examples about this particular issue. Just saying what time is now? Sorry, I'm trying to see if I'm on time or not. I'm not on time. Well, anyway, two examples about the way in which planetary boundaries work, and I want to pass to you the message of two fundamental things that are changing the way in which the Earth is moving these days, and the way in which you can put numbers on that. One is climate change. The issue about climate change is that planetary boundaries says that we are in a safe limit if we, in the concentration of these gases in the atmosphere, we were in this 360 per million of molecules that we have in the air were gases of this type. In the Paris Agreement, you know the Paris Agreement, the Global Conference of Climate Change, we decided to make another limit around the end of this circle. And this limit is the limit that in which we accept some risk, but the risk is acceptable for us. And we decided that this would be 450, because 450 and 1.5 degrees plus is in agreement with the models, but also because 450, when we cross 450, there is impossible to stop this growth of temperature until 2. So 450, 10 years plus, we will be in 2 degrees, in the 2 degrees scenario, which is the maximum that we decided to accept in the Paris Agreement. So this is the outer limit. And this 450, today we are in 430, and we are growing 2.5 parts per million per year. So in less than 10 years, we will reach this point. And with the Trump administration right now in America and all these things that we have about this geopolitical, geoeconomic confrontation, you need to be prepared, because we are going to be in this planet with 2 degrees for sure. And this is what science is saying. We need to be prepared. We need to be prepared, our societies, to reach that. I don't know if you follow the news in Spain this last week. There is a fantastic documentary, because in the climate policy course that we ran, I passed to the students. It was a documentary that was created in 2016. It says, "Thanks for the rain." It's about a Kenyan farmer that discovered the climate change because he's seen something in their farms, and it's invited to go to the Paris Agreement to talk to the guys about his problem. And the guys in the Paris, they say, "Okay, great, it's your problem," and that's all. It's a fantastic documentary, but what is happening in Kenya in this documentary is happening in Spain this week. We have a drought, a tremendous drought during the last 3 years. We didn't have water, and suddenly everything in the south part of Spain is flooded. And this is happening these days. And this is the way in which, this is just the starting point. This is just the starting point. But we need to be prepared for that. And business needs to be prepared for that, because this is the world is coming. Let me say something about that. The problem, climate change in one particular slide. We live in a world that I am not going to question what is the PC, I said. It's the machine that moves the world. The machine that moves the world is the production-consumption machine. And this production-consumption machine is fueled by fossil fuels. All the things that we are saying these days about renewables is great. Renewables are exploding right now, but renewables are only just adding some energy to the growth of the economy, but not to the economy that we have had. 80% of the energy that moves the world comes steadily from the last decades from the burning of fossil fuels. And because of that, we are just sending, that's the last data from 2025, 38 gigatons per year up there. And in addition to that, we have other gases that are not CO2, that doesn't come from the energy, it comes from land transformation and from agriculture. So basically, during these days, we are sending around 50 gigatons of CO2 emissions per year. So this is this part, and this is the impact. Remember the impact of the IPAT equation. The impact. This is the idea that we had in the 80s about what we need to stabilize. I tell you that because when you teach sustainable development, you need to teach the sustainable development of today. Because you can teach the history about sustainable development. But what happened and what we defined in the 80s is not what is happening today. And this is the impact. This is the impact. And you can just present the data in CO2 or in carbon, because there is a conversion factor about that, depending on what you want to employ. And then these emissions goes up, and these emissions goes to the atmosphere. And the atmosphere, 200 years ago, was stable. Everything that goes there, the same amount was captured by phytoplankton and the plants that we have on the earth. Right now, this is not happening. 46%, last data, 46% of these gases will stay at the end of the year. They will not be captured in the same amount for plants and phytoplankton. And this is what it breaks the energy balance. The energy balance is not in balance any longer. And because we are sending more gases there, something is happening. And this something is happening are the effects. And this is the most important part of my talk. To be able to differentiate clearly of what is impact and what is effect. Because what it is important for us, this is for sure, but what is important for us and what is done right now, the changes in the environmental policy we see in the world is this. Because what we want to stabilize is the state of the atmosphere, is the state of the rivers, is the state of the ocean, is the state. So what we want to stabilize are those effects. So, of course, we need to work with the impact, but we will need to reduce a lot the impact in order to stabilize that. And because of that, we have a lot of consequences. You can see this in the diagram of social ecological situation I said before, and we are responding, in this case, by the Paris Agreement. So here you have a slide about what is all about of the climate change. And this is happening in the atmosphere. In the next one, if you see the changes, the only changes is on the effects, and this is the changes that we are producing because of the climate change in the hydrosphere or in the cryosphere when you relate with water. So those changes of the energy balance transform things in all the different components of the earth, less in the lithosphere, but on the other things. So if we are able to deal with the energy system, energy and mobility systems of the earth, if we would have been able, if we agree with that, if we agree with the solutions, the climate-adopted solutions at a global level, that now with the administration we have in some parts of the world, it's almost impossible, because it is not it is not in the 10 problems that we saw in the global report, but I tell you that I'm a scientist. And I think that if the powerful guys that dominate the world does not believe in science, we have a big problem. Big problem. And this is something that is not there, but I think that should be. Because it's not because I'm a scientist, but I think that science produces knowledge in a way that has some kind of revision. And another very important issue, science has credibility. It is credible, or should be credible. And if we lost credibility, we lost society. And this is what happened with law in many parts of the world, the power of law and the power of government. So credibility needs to be there for a working well system on societies. Huh? But anyway, energy and mobility. The second problem is food. And in food, we have another issue here with another planetary boundary, which is biodiversity integrity. In here, we have two things for biodiversity, one at the level of functions and one at the level of structures. At the level of structures, we put the indicator, which is the indicator of biodiversity, and the level of structures. And this biodiversity as the loss of species we have for millions of species today in a year. And there is something very interesting when we talk about that, and those are numbers. The good thing about the planetary boundaries is that they were able to put numbers and to put data and to put indicators to all these 9 environmental problems. Some of them as the climate, because we have a climate monitorization, or a global climate monitorization and auditing, we know very well this data. Other data are not so well known, but indicators are there. To put an example of what is the problem with biodiversity, I raised these questions with my students. I asked the students to see if for the wild fauna that we have today, we have more biomass weight of this fauna today or 10,000 years ago. And this comes from a science paper, and the science paper was done not with fishes, excluding fishes, but with what is terrestrial vertebrates, so mammals, birds, amphibians, and reptiles. And mammals is men. When you ask this question, of course, now we have much more biomass than we used to have 10,000 years ago. Of course, for wild animals, we have less than 10,000 years ago. And when I asked the second question about, okay, from these terrestrial vertebrates, which is the species that makes more biomass to the system? And probably orders of magnitude more than the wild animal biomass we have in the world 10,000 years ago. And people normally in the class says, okay, probably it's men. But it's not men. No? It's not men. Are cows. So 60% of the biomass we have today on terrestrial vertebrates on the earth are just cows. Our food. And we don't need it. We don't need so much food on this particular one. We could eat better. And I'm responsible. We are all responsible. I ate a burger right now. I came from eating a burger today. So we are all, I came by a plane. So we are all responsible. I don't know in which way we can find a global solution for that. But the fact that we have the cows having 60% of the biomass of terrestrial vertebrates is worse, because from all the agricultural farms we have in the world, 70% of this production is just for feeding these cows. So from all the agricultural farms that are displaced tropical forests and displaced forests all over, basically what we do is feed the animals that are going to be our food. So we have to make a disequilibrium, a total disequilibrium in the global ecosystems in the world as a consequence of the food system. If we were able to solve the problems of energy and the problems of food, we could have solutions for what I said before. Okay, so that's I think I wanted to show before to jump into the second part, kind of a global environmental challenge we have today, with the main issue saying that we shouldn't focus just on the impacts. We should focus more on the effects, the state of the environment we want. Okay, let's go to present a little bit about our proposal of a business in nature. The last conclusion of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment say that to reverse this situation of degradation, significant changes in policy, institutions, and practices needs to be done. We need to produce this big transformation. Politically, with norms, but also with practice. And practice means we and also all business and all governments that are in the world. We need to have practices. When we talk about corporate sustainability, the action of our sustainable development strategy, these actions can be personal, but should be also from business and also from nations. So to deal with that, coming back to my temporal slide, I will put you, and I'm going to bring you an idea that you will remember always. This is what I do with the students, just because this is so I would say so, it doesn't come to my mind the word. It's so lazy to learn about these issues, about the historical evolution of corporate sustainability, but I tell you that you will remember that for sure in the coming years, for what is coming now. So in the 90s, we started to talk about corporate sustainability. And this corporate sustainability is something new to some other things that we were just having in the 50s, 60s in business, which is the corporate social responsibility. Today, when you teach corporate sustainability, you are not teaching just responsibility. Of course, you have the responsibility to address all these issues, but corporate sustainability today is strategy. Corporate sustainability today is operations, is finance, is changing, is transforming business. So it's much more than responsibility. For these two visions of corporate sustainability, which is the framework I want to add something today, I have two figures to you. And in that way, you will remember that. You know this guy. For the cartoons, you know this guy. You are thinking, it's Mickey, it's Mickey Mouse. When we started to talk about corporate sustainability, we used to have the Mickey Mouse image, this image. The Mickey Mouse was saying, okay, it's fine, we are going into corporate sustainability, but in this corporate sustainability, our mayor is the economy. And the societal part and the ecological part are something that we have problems there. If we are addressing these risks, addressing these problems, we can get more value for our companies. So we can increase the value of the companies. So that was the first most definition about corporate sustainability, to add value because you were solving problems. So the Mickey Mouse idea. The second one, for the young people, you will not recognize that, but when I start to sing this song, then the older guys, you will recognize that. Do you remember that? The Pink Panther show, yeah, the Pink Panther. The Pink Panther is the triple bottom line. The Pink Panther is the time in which we say, okay, but we need to do that in the similar way. The three components are equally important. But then you adjust the companies, you adjust what you do depending, well, sometimes in social issues, sometimes environmental issues. I remember because you were in this particular course, we have one company in a particular course that it came to me and it made me think a lot about that, what they present, because what they present was wrong. And they say, okay, for us, we are working with the triple bottom line, but with mayor goes from that and that. And they forgot the environment, but for that and that. Then they said, my mayor go. Well, this is not a way to approximate to the problems of sustainability, that you need to see it in an integrated way. So there is not an integrated way in the triple bottom line sometimes. And this is the main issue that you need to recognize. So the Pink Panther show, the triple bottom line, is just saying that. And this is the concept that is mostly in depth today, for the reporting for sure, mostly in depth today in business. and we want to go a little bit further with this. So when we wrote the book, we just say that following what others were saying, because you'll see now a definition in here from Thomas Dillig, which is a professor in Switzerland, that was saying that, okay, with this issue of the triple bottom line, we are not going to solve the problem. And there were professors in America that were concentrating in the issue of creating shared value, and this shared value should be not just for the business, it would share value for all the stakeholders, considering also the environmental systems, the earth as another stakeholder. So having this shared value. So we try to pass the message with that and to create, well, what you saw before and what you probably have seen in the donuts economy, books that remember the books of the donuts economy, and other people that are addressing these issues. That the economy is something that happens inside societies and help to develop these societies, but it's something that happens also in the world and helps theoretically to develop the world, but not compromising the stability of this world. We don't have a cartoon for that, probably. Remember a bee, maybe, but if you can assimilate the issues about cartoons with the evolution of the corporate sustainability, you can do it with these three images. So from there, with Stefano, we produced this book, and we just developed this idea that, okay, you need to enhance social well-being of people because there is a lot of poverty in the world. Poverty is one of the Sustainable Development Goals that is less addressed by companies in the world. We measure that. We need to enhance social well-being and economic prosperity because this is all about that. But at the same time, we should be able to maintain the integrity of our natural systems. We should be able to maintain the integrity of the natural systems for ourselves, because we depend on that, because we need these goods and ecosystem services in order to feed our systems and to provoke this well-being and economic prosperity. If not, we are going into a collapse of the environment, which was one of the risks that is addressed in the report that we said before, and who knows what is going to be behind. And also we define the concept of corporate sustainability, the action that we need to do in order to develop this strategy. So it's a clear difference between the strategy and the action, between sustainable development and sustainability. The strategy and the action. We need to act, and we need to act with the same ideas, creating this shared value, but maintaining the resilience that we need to produce in our systems. Okay, so we move into that, and now it comes to the idea of the prepositions. I put this slide just because what you say. This is a Nature paper that I recommend strongly to you to read. Strongly to you to read. This is a fantastic paper. And in the paper, it's close. It's 2022 or 23. 2023 is a recent one, and it comes from the people from IPBES, the International Platform of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the policy, the science action under the Conference of Biodiversity of the United Nations. It's a very good one with this table, in which I can explain to you the way people is using nature, and the way we have several worldviews about nature that we need to change. The first one, and that is the time for the preposition, is something that UNESCO was named many years ago with a big framework, humans and nature. Humans and nature. But we define humans and nature as this particular part of society that see nature, for example, people that live in a city, see nature as the food, the water, I need food, the food that I need to have, the water I need to have, but humans are basically seeing nature very distant. Humans and nature. This is a very anthropocentric vision about nature. There are people, it's here, but most of the people in Western societies, at least, are with another preposition, they are business with nature. So I don't know where are you going to go for vacations, but probably you will go for vacations to places in which there is nature. I will go to the Canary Islands, or I will go to ski in Austria, or I will go, if you are good enough, to the Maldives Islands, and then nature will be there, and I will be with nature because I like nature. I will go to see animals in a safari in Kenya. I will see nature, but this is just for my enjoyment. And sometimes in the future we will see this through the artificial intelligence, but with nature, another anthropocentric vision. The vision that we need to provoke is to understand that we are part of nature. We are carbon and water. We are part of nature. And after we've been here, our carbon and our water will move in this in these ecological cycles and will be part of something else. So we are nature. And because of that, we are changing all this Earth system process we saw before. And business needs to understand, it's fundamental that they understand that they are big part of nature. They are in nature. I think that this is super important these days. And the way in which we need to pass the message, because we go away, is that business schools needs to do some kind of teaching at the first course, at the first level, to indicate the students at least some of the issues that I'm just saying to you, because the way in which business needs to work with is about these relationships. And if we continue doing this business as usual, well, there's a limits of growth, the book of limits of growth, and a collapse that probably will be confronting humanity in few decades, if we are moving the same way. And so we need to make this change. And there are aborigines and there are other kind of people in the earth that for them, what they do, the activities they do, are just mimic practically with nature. Well, the way in which you use prepositions, it's you say business for nature. Business for nature, for me, gives you the idea that you are restoring nature, which is something that you need to do. We have a law right now in the European Parliament, the law of restoration, that is just saying a mandate of countries that you need to restore nation. And you need to restore nation cannot be in the hands of the public arena. If private companies doesn't make charge that this also their responsibility, we will not address this law. So it's true that in this way we need to go forward. But in is much more important for me. Okay, so I'm finishing right now. So just very few things about what are the main conditions of this concept. The first one is that you need to, very few companies think about that, but you need to change the idea that the only thing that they take care, because of the rebound effect, is just the impact you have on the environment, because the important thing is to contribute to the best state for the environment you can do in the future. So pass from impacts to effects. That's the first message that comes from the business in nature concept. The second one is that you cannot be able to deal with these issues just working in your facilities. You need to extend your intervention, you need to extend the recommendations to your entire value chain. Upstream, downstream, you need to engage all people in collaborations to deal with the problems at that level, because in the value chain of a company, most of the impacts does not occur in the facilities of production. Most of the impacts occur in the value chain or with the consumption of the issues we produce. The cars, most of the impact when you run a car. So that's the issue. And I passed to. Okay, sorry, I just passed to that before. Was not in my narrative. I think that this comes here. Yeah, this is the replacement we recommend. Instead, if you understand sustainable development in the 20s and you compare sustainable development in the 80s, you have at least two changes. The first change is this one. What you need to stabilize, what you need to equalize are the effects not the impacts. Remember the diagram in which we decided what was the impact and what was the effect? What we need to stabilize is the concentration of the gases in the atmosphere. How you do that, how you respond to that, means that you will need to do a lot to decouple impacts from growth and to reduce, minimize as possible, as much the impact. But what you need to address is the effects. And then the second one, which is implicit, technology is fine. Technology, for sure, it will contribute, but there is something else. It's the techno behavior, it's the way in which we address our lifestyles, and there are much more things than just technology. And so the third factor can be just shared with other issues than the ones that were just put in here when the impact equation was created. Okay, so we have this standard boundaries. The third one is, well, you know because you are in Europe, and in Europe we have a policy that in 2050 the carbon emissions will be zero. We need to have a society of zero carbon stable in 2050. All the products that you have in front of you, your mobile, your bags, your T-shirts, wherever, has a carbon footprint. It means that in 2050, all these products need to be changed. So it's an open completely space for innovation and creativity. But what we have today is not what we should have in 2050. We need to change completely the way in which we behave and we live. And the third one is that at least the two first things, you cannot do it as a free rider. You need to work in collaboration. So these global agreements that right now, unfortunately, because of this way in which we are going with the politics, we are getting out of these global agreements. These global agreements are so important because it sets the rules in which we need to develop this collaboration. So those are like 4 dreams of action that we need to put forward and we need to pass, that we need to create. Natural capital, the value chain, innovability, which is a combination of innovation and sustainability, on networking. And the main issues that we have today in business is decarbonization, biodiversity, and circularity. So I think that that's the last one. We are just moving this business in nature concept first to try to put more theory on management to the concept, and secondly, we are working in the blue economy, trying to work with this value chain system and try to pass recommendations. There is it's not the slide here, but I work for a foundation in Italy that is called the One Ocean Foundation. One Ocean Foundation, and it's very easy to find in Google. And there we have plenty of reports about the blue economy. Behind we have these ideas that we develop in the business in nature. Okay, so I think that that's we have this guy. This is Johan Rostrom, and Johan Rostrom that has a book, a nice book with this narrative that we used to live in a small planet inside a big wall, and this small planet is getting smaller, and a big wall is getting smaller, and the planet of people is growing. So this narrative of Johan Rostrom about how to pass or how to accept that we are 8 billion going for 10, and we need to make room, and we need to try to get into the idea that we are also part of nature. And I think that this is kind of a narrative that I want to pass to you in this particular speech. So thank you very much. I don't know if I was too quick, but and I don't know if I did it in 45 minutes, but.